Hahnemühle is one of the prize sponsors for my World Watercolor Month Watercolor Summer Challenge, and I've been given an assortment of Hahnemühle watercolor papers to review, and I'm excited about trying them. They're a German company. I haven't used them before. This is the first experience I have with these papers. I have 3 different types of paper here. I have Leonardo this is their 280 pound or 600 GSM paper. Their sheets are nice and thick, just almost like cardboard. If you've ever worked with 300-pound paper, this is the same thing. And I have the matte and the rough, and matte would be equivalent to cold press, and then the rough is a little more textured. I have the same matte and rough in the Cézanne paper. It's the 140-pound weight paper, and again, these are described as mold-made, acid-free, age-resistant, surface-sized, natural white, and 100% cotton rag. And this is what I look for first of all when I'm buying paper. 100% cotton. Anything less than that just doesn't flow beautifully for my loose and fluid watercolor style. And I never want to feel like I have to fight with my paper to get the effect that I want. So just that description alone would give me confidence to give these papers a try if I saw them on the shelf in my local art supply store. The third type I have here is the Turner paper, and the only difference in the description that I see, it's 140-pound cold pressed or matte, and it says here it doesn't have the description surface sized, and I don't know a lot about sizing, but I would expect that a surface-sized paper and a non-surface-sized paper might flow the color just a little bit differently. I'm not sure that it'll be something I notice in my first use of the paper. Sometimes you have to get to know a paper to really know if it's going to be a long-term relationship or just one of those short-term ones. But in my experiments so far, I've painted both loosely and with a little more control, and I'm having a lot of fun. So let's just do a little bit of painting and see how things go. And I'm going to choose the 140-pound matte for my painting today, because for most of us, we often fall in that 140-pound weight is usually a little more affordable than the 280 or 300-pound, and matte or cold press is that nice in-between paper that is used by the majority of watercolorists. I'm going to base my painting today on this paper just because it'll be the one most likely for most of us to try. I like these blocks. They have a nice sturdy backing board, and then this has 10 sheets, and they are bound on 4 edges. So I have a corner here that's loose so that I can peel it off the backing when I'm done. And I usually just run a palette knife or a thin blade just along all 4 sides to loosen it. When you buy blocks, you don't have to tape them down first. They're already all set up and ready for you to go. You don't have to look for a front or a back side of the paper because that's set up for you as well. Personally, I know most papers paint better on one side than the other, but if I mess up on one side, I'm always going to flip it over and try the second side, give myself my money's worth for that paper. I have been working on a series based on kind of florals and butterflies with expressive, beautiful brush strokes. So I'm going to do some of that today. And it's a fun technique because we're working on dry paper and doing a beautiful loose painting. So I'm going to start with a pink, and I'm just going to use the side of my brush to paint my first flower shape. And squishing the brush down lets me create a flower shape in one stroke. Isn't that pretty? Do another one. Let's see here. Let's do it fairly close to them. Let's do a kind of a bud shape. So maybe just 4 little flowers, 4 little petals. And we'll do maybe another flower, bigger flower shape up here. And working with fairly juicy pigment means that I can create one petal that's brighter than the others and let them kind of flow together. And then I'll grab a yellow, this is Aureolin, and dot in a center to my flower. And that'll also give me some interplay between the colors. Look at how that Aureolin just pushes across the paper. And that tells me something about this paper from the get-go, and that is that I get good flow on this paper. When you're working wet and wet, you'll notice with the cellulose papers, anything with a little bit of tree pulp in it, you're gonna end up with less flow. The pigment just doesn't want to flow as well on those mixed papers. So 100% cotton gives you that movement where you can create with wet and wet brush strokes, lots of juicy pigment, and see the colors move and dance across the paper. And I'm creating some leaves. This is a sword brush. This is a 1/4 inch sword brush made by Rosemary and Company. And I'll be reviewing those later in the summer as well. So I have the one kind of boring stem, flower stem. So I want to do something more interesting. And one thing that happens is when I take this sword brush, I get some unpredictability. And I'm going to grab some of my favorite turquoises here. I've got Cobalt Teal and Sleeping Beauty Turquoise side by side. So I'm going to use them kind of together. And with the sword brush, I can create some very loose brush strokes. And I like to pull with the sword down the page and then lift to get a thinner line. And I don't have a lot of control that way, which gives me some really great movement and some really organic shapes, which I love when you get that really natural brush strokes. And I'm going to go with, I think I want a lot of color down here actually. Let's put on lots of this phthalo yellow green because it's just really fun. And I love the way it makes the reds in this painting glow as well. And let's pull some of that yellow green right up here. I accidentally grabbed a little bit of my flower, but that's okay. With a wet brush I can pull some of that color out from that original brush stroke. And then grab some of my turquoise again. And some of that ultramarine, Rose of Ultramarine. These are all pigments. I think they're all from Daniel Smith today. And we need some more reds. So now I will go back to my round brush and pick up some of that Rose Madder Lake and create some more flower petals. This flower is going to be behind this leaf shape, so I only have to paint 2 petals there. Maybe a little dab on that side. There's another petal over there. Yeah, I kind of like that little brush strokes, like petals might be falling to the ground. And I think we need another petal flower shape up here. And what made our flower so pretty earlier was that addition of the aureolin. I'm going to pick some up with my brush and touch it in to that addictive whoosh across the paper. And I'm going to spray a little aureolin on the paper as well, knowing that it pushes moist pigment that's already there. Means I'll get little whooshes all over my painting, which I love. Very addictive. The best watercolor paper is going to be able to take a lot of water and successive layers of color. So we will let this dry in a moment and then come back to it and see how adding additional layers, how it handles that. And then it's going to provide or allow for beautiful movement of pigment and lovely little mingling bits of pigment as well. And I want you to look at this area right here, right in here. Isn't that just so many beautiful colors dancing together on the paper? And even up here, where it's just the yellow-green, there's these lovely moments of texture, value changes from light to dark that are subtle and beautiful and really fun to look at. And whether you see flowers or whether you see butterflies, it's just that lightness of color and movement that I'm trying to express in these paintings. I haven't done a lot in this area, and what happens is when you're working with a composition that has this beautiful curve, you don't really want to fill every area of your painting with shape and line and color and movement. We need some maybe open, quiet spaces to balance out the activity and the vibrant colors that are happening here. In fact, some of these little blotches of spatter are almost too bright, and I'm going to lighten those and diminish them a little bit just with some water. And this is a good test to see how that color lifts. Good watercolor paper should hold your paint a little bit. It shouldn't just lift immediately off, but you also want it to be able to handle a little rubbing and scrubbing so that you can, rub a little bit and remove color if necessary. So I see that my yellow-green, which is a staining color, did, soak in, which is all fine and good because I just need to lighten that slightly so it's not so dominant and I get a nice quiet open space right down here. I can decide, I might decide later I want to add more to that, but at this stage I'm really liking this beautiful curve, and this shape here just accentuates that curve. I don't want to add anything more to this right now. I want it to have the chance to dry. All these lovely little wet and wet moments, they can keep mingling. When I'm not painting with a loose and fluid painting like this, where I have color pushing out across the paper and into those other washes, I don't want to blow dry it. I want to let the pigment, as long as it's moist, the pigment's going to keep doing its thing. So I want to let the pigment continue to create its magic. I can't make these things happen with my paintbrush. I just drop the color in and hope for beautiful things to happen. On good paper with great paint and that light touch, it's a lot easier to get these beautiful fluid effects. You're going to struggle with it a lot more on a cheaper paper. I'm coming back to continue my watercolor painting on Hahnemühle paper, and checking how your paper handles after the first layer has dried is really important to getting to know the quality of your paper and how it's going to behave. If these layers that I'd placed down haven't bonded with the paper, and this is most likely on a slicker sized, cheaper paper, a student grade or cellulose paper, will often have a smoother, kind of almost shiny feeling surface. The paint doesn't stick to it nearly as well, and it usually doesn't kind of flow and create these beautiful dancing moments either. I've had the beautiful dancing moments with my Hahnemühle Cézanne paper, and I'm excited to see that the colors have remained as vibrant as they originally were when I put them on the painting. The other thing I'm seeing as this painting has dried is that every now and then with some papers, and to tell you the truth, I'm not sure whether I should lay blame on the paper or the paint, but sometimes when you put down a wash of darker color, as it dries, little sparkly white specks of paper kind of start to show through. It's like it doesn't cover as well, or the paper just, I don't know what it is actually, but you get this almost bloom of paper speckles through the wash. And I'm not seeing that at all here where the pigment is quite saturated. Here in the green where I might notice those little white specks, it's not happening at all. So I'm loving that, and very happy to see that what I placed originally on the paper looks virtually unchanged now that the paint has dried. Like I said, with the slicker surface papers, and I'm not sure I finished that thought when I started explaining it, but with a paper with a slicker surface, the pigment will not bond in the same way. So that means as soon as you start adding fresh color, let's say we start layering down some more, some details with some turquoise, and as soon as I start laying that fresh color, especially if you're using a fairly juicy wash, the pigment underneath is going to start to move. And so what's underneath doesn't remain as fresh and beautiful as you originally placed it. So let's take a look and see if that's going to happen as I paint on the Hahnemühle. And I can already tell you that I think I'm going to be pretty satisfied with how well my pigment bonds to my paper. So I want to look at this section in particular because there's quite a lot of pigment there. And as I've added, well, first of all, I can see right away that there's not this feeling of paint and paper layered on top of each other. The paper almost feels like it's stained with these colors that I originally placed. And so it feels as though there's a complete unity between paper and paint. And I love that when that happens, when you have virtually no difference. There's no textural difference. There's no visual difference. It just looks very smooth and even. Now, if I moisten an area of my painting, and I'm hesitant to do it in a really obvious spot because I don't want to lose anything that I laid down. Everything's so pretty. I'll do it right over here where I've got several colors going on. So I'm moistening it with my brush. Then I can take my paper towel and give it a little rub. And I am picking up some pigment. You can see the yellow-green on my paper towel, but it's not wiping away like it would if this were painted on a slicker surface. Think about if your watercolor paint dries on your painting board. It's really easy to wipe it off. You just moisten it and you can get right back to the white of the board. Whereas with paper, you want it to be a little more permanent. And I'm definitely seeing that with the Hahnemühle paper. If you are a new or beginning painter who's using student grade paper, you're going to be used to that slicker surface and you're going to like it because to you it feels like you have more opportunity to fix mistakes. And I understand that. What happens is as you paint on the student grade paper, you're developing strategies for using that liftability of the student grade paint and paper. And while it's going to feel like it's easier to fix mistakes, I think you lose so much by not having this beautiful liquid flow that it's really worthwhile to get to know the artist quality papers and really learn how they respond and how to paint to that type of paper. Once upon a time, it felt like for artists, the only paper that was available, there was only one brand of paper that was kind of the industry standard. And nowadays, it's much easier. And I love that you don't just have to source out one variety of paper. There are different cotton rag papers out there. There's different mold-made papers. There are different price ranges and there are sizes that you can choose from. And all of it will improve your painting experience and make it easier for you to create beautiful fluid effects in watercolor. I'm very happy so far with my Hahnemühle paper. Not so happy with that blotchy thing I just did, and I think I'll have to wash it away. And that's actually another test of the paper right there. How much water and abuse can a piece of paper take? By adding that liquid, I'm flowing that excess color that I didn't like down off the page. Going back to basically the first layer, it's slightly bleached because of course a little bit of that pigment will move. And so I can just jazz it up with a little more brightness with some of that yellow, phthalo yellow green, just to revitalize the color. But I'm not going to add that rose madder and make it dull again, because that was a mistake. I didn't like the way it looked. But maybe a few lines of a color that does complement, correspond well, in the turquoise. And then right up in this corner I dripped a big blob of yellow-green that looks really cool and opaque on top of the red. So maybe I can do that in a few other places. A few more droplets. Something I should mention to look for in a paper that calls itself handmade is every now and then you'll get one that doesn't leave a crisp line, and the paper is just a little too absorbent. So there's that whole push and pull between you want a paper that isn't so slick that your color lifts, but you want one that's not so absorbent that when the color goes on, it's blotchy like painting on a piece of paper towel. And we don't get a nice crisp edge if the paper is too absorbent. So we want to be able to hold a beautiful edge. I should mention that there are a few rough edges here in this painting, and they're created by my brush and not by the paper themselves. So over here you can see there's a bit of a rougher edge, and that's just because of the way I was using my brush, pulling the edge of it across the paper rather than making a crisper, finer line. So knowing that that was me, and you can get a crisp line on the Hahnemühle, which is really good to know. And the ability to paint in a nice, clean, and crisp way will make this paper work well for more realistic painters as well as for loose painters like me. Now, truthfully, when I came into the studio to add some finishing touches to this painting, I really didn't want to do much. I'm loving the beautiful colors and shapes happening. I'm loving this curved design composition that I think I'm going to be reusing that compositional angle in future paintings. And I don't know, when a painting is kind of dancing and looking effortless, maybe it says all it needs to say and I get to call this playtime done. Now, I have a few great things to tell you, and one is that Hahnemühle is a prize package sponsor of my Watercolor Summer Challenge. All summer, I'm issuing challenge prompts, opportunities to win a great big $800 value watercolor prize package at the end of August. And in conjunction with World Watercolor Month this month, I'm also donating $1 from every course purchased at learn.angelafair.com to the Dreaming Zebra Foundation. And this is an organization that gives art supplies to children who might not otherwise have access to them. They make them available through programs and different outreaches for kids to express their creativity. We know that creativity can be really empowering and healing, and a great way to communicate as well and to reach people's hearts. And so I love being a part of that. I'm very excited to sponsor Dreaming Zebra again this year for World Watercolor Month. For more information on my Watercolor Summer Challenge on my website and the programs that I offer, you can check out watercolorsummerchallenge.com and my site at learn.angelafair.com. I encourage you too to visit the Hahnemühle website and make sure you look for Hahnemühle paper at an art supplier near you, or online. You can take a look for their suppliers, their different distributors throughout the country at hahnemühle.com.